Good evening. Welcome to HOUSEMAN's Books and the 15th of June 2023. In a few minutes, we'll be beginning this forum, African Roots, a pre-conference evening before the Anti-Militarist Roots Conference of the War Resisters International. We're excited as International Peace Research Association to co-host this evening, which will present a variety of different pieces, speakers in one video, at the work of the Pan-African Nonviolence and Peacebuilders Network, and ongoing thoughts about solidarity, Pan-Africanism, and Global South connections. So stay tuned, be officially part of the pre-meeting hanging out, and we're going to stay live, but go into the actual meeting in probably about 5 minutes. Okay. You're on screen. You look very official now.
But still, it's very comfortable by
I'm too fidgety to
That's why I got one of these chairs for myself. And I'm going to stand up when I'm saying. But yeah, so but I would I'd mainly be up here when you're talking. Yeah, sit there and then come up. Yeah. Make sure the mic is Albert.
Hello.
How's it going? Good to see you.
You made it over here.
I'm here.
You're here.
I'm here.
Good. Good for you.
Happily here.
Happily.
Happily.
In this place.
Yeah, even. Especially in this place. Okay, I don't know how I'm going to do this. There we go. Okay. You turn it on first. That's what you do. You turn it on first, and then you speak into it. I get that. Hi, my name is Matt Meyer. For those who don't know, it's really a pleasure and honor to be here. We're going to start this evening of African Roots, a pre-conference, or we like to think of it as an open conference evening here at Historic HOUSEMAN Books, to look at African and Global South roots of resistance, including some of WI's rich history in that area, before we go into the public conference tomorrow morning, Anti-Militarist Roots. I think for logistical reasons, and also because it's sometimes hard to focus on videos, and also to focus on things as we get later into the day and tireder, we're going to start with one video we have, because mostly we have people in the room, but sadly, Moses Monday, who is a key part of this work, a member of WI Council, and for the last years, the co-coordinator of the Pan-African Nonviolence and Peacebuilders Network, could not get visa to come here this week. So he's here with us with a videotape, which I will play. I think that the advanced technology of HOUSEMAN's means that the way we do this is we turn my laptop around But in case that's not perfect, 2 notes. We will have it mic'd so you can at least hear it, and it is short, so you won't have to suffer through it if you can't for too long. So we're going to start with Moses Monday. Moses Monday, for those who don't know, in addition to everything I just said, is also a key leader of the Organization of Nonviolence and Development in South Sudan. He will talk a little bit about this as well in the presentation, but South Sudan was the center of a major series of nonviolence and peacebuilding activities last November. You're not talking about volume, you're talking about the thing should be higher up. Ah, you see, I got you. Stack a few books, will you? And on the bookshelf. Ah. It is that high technology and collective communication that makes Houseman and our movements what it is. Okay. You hold this. Actually, let's just pull the chair. Can you pull the chair out of the way? Just pull the chair out of the way. Okay. All right. How is that? All right. So,
The light is not good.
That would be good, yeah.
The lamp should be switched off.
okay.
No,
I tried the one switch in front of me. Where is the correct switch? People who work at Houseman's? People who work near Houseman's?
Where's Albert?
Okay, I don't know where they are.
You know, switch those 3 lights off?
Yeah.
Just to your.
Yeah, okay, not quite.
Turn everything else off.
So I was just saying. Okay, there we go. So Moses. Yeah. Thanks. So you don't need. You need me to do this. I'm going to do this for the video, but so Moses also helped coordinate this major series of meetings and conferences over a 3-week period last November in Juba, South Sudan, that included some representation from WI. It included the first major International Fellowship of Reconciliation, the first major International Fellowship of Reconciliation conference on African soil, and included a conference of the African Peace Research and Education Association, and the first major in-person meeting of PANPEN since 2014, when we met in South Africa in Cape Town. So this is Moses Monday, and I know this is not going to be perfect for everyone, but we'll try to put the angle of the video as close as we can, so that most of you can see it. And in any case, as I say, it's 8 minutes, and then the rest of us will be in the room together, and that will be good. So is this angle the best? Is this basically good for most of you?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, good.
All righty.
Hi, colleagues and comrades attending conference and the Council of War Resisters International. I greet you all. I am known to some of you, and perhaps I may be new to some, but my names are Moses John, and I am the Executive Director of Organization for Nonviolence and Development, one of the sections of War Resisters International, based in Juba, South Sudan. It has been a while since we last met in Bogota, if I can remember well, but also due to COVID-19, possible for many of us to meet in person. But this year, it is important that the members of WRI are meeting in person in London, which is very, very important. And I am making this video in order to join you and also to address you myself, and also on behalf of my colleague Nazize, and indeed the entire members of the Pan-African Nonviolence and Peacebuilding Network in Africa. PEN, as many of you know, is a network of the networks in Africa. The idea of initiating this network goes back to 2012, when WRI organized the first ever non-violence training of trainers in the region. And the idea was further developed, and in 2014, PEN was officially established as a network of the networks to coordinate efforts of war resisters and non-violent activists in the region and beyond. And since that time, the Organization for Nonviolence and Development, the organization that I co-founded and currently is the executive director, is hosting and coordinating the activities of the PEN together with my colleague Nazizwe from Embrace Dignity, a civil society organization in South Africa. So the way we operate as PEN is that we work through the member organizations, and we try to support, inspire, and encourage one another, but most importantly, to share best practice and to support each other in order to contribute positively in building Africa that is non-violent, peaceful, and democratic. And over the years, we have worked with civil society groups from over 35 countries. And those civil society groups includes women, youth groups in the region, but also academia and the think tanks, including the African Peace Research Education Association, AFRIA, which is a member of the International Peace Research Association, for which our dear colleague, Matt Meyer, is the General Secretary. And so we have been working together in order to solidify this, but also to bring hope to the people in the region. And in November 2022, over 50 PEN members and partners met in person in Juba, South Sudan. And the meeting was organized in collaboration with the International Fellowship of Reconciliation and also IPRA, as well as AFRIA. And the meeting provided an opportunity for the members of PEN over a period of years to meet in person and to reflect on their stories of change, and also to identify best practices and inspire one another in order to continue the struggle for peace. So the meeting, which was held in Juba, in our view, was a very productive meeting, because we were able to draw some insights from how we do our work and how our work contributes in building global peace. And it was very clear from the stories that members shared that PEN is doing great work in the region, ranging from the grassroots to national and regional peace movement. And on that basis, PEN was granted the status of an affiliate member in the International Fellowship of Reconciliation. So you can see PEN, together with War Resistance International, we have become part of the global peace movement. And of course, IFO and WRI have been sisterly organizations that have been working together for over a century. And therefore, we believe with this partnership, we will be able to contribute in comparing notes and supporting each other as we work together to build a just world. As I conclude, I also wish to emphasize that among some of the important contributions of PEN is to support peace advocates and nonviolent and war resistance activists in the conflict-prone countries. One example I can cite is the situation in Sudan, which many of us know. The conflict which erupted from the 15th of April this year has actually resulted into displacement of people, destruction of properties, and also causing a lot of unnecessary suffering to the population in Sudan. And therefore, PEN in collaboration with peace stakeholders in Sudan and in the region, we try to support bring peace in South Sudan through peace diplomacy. And as some of you know, my country, the Republic of South Sudan, is being tasked by the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, that's IGAD, as a sub-regional body, to provide support in bringing the conflict in Sudan to halt. So we try to do our best to advocate through our government, but also through other regional bodies to ensure that peace is restored in Sudan. And we know the conflict in Sudan has a lot of implications in the region. So it is not only about Sudan, but it is about the region and perhaps other regions of the world as well. So we feel concerned about this. And as a result, activists in Sudan have organized actually a peaceful protest in the Sudanese embassy on the 2nd of May this year to express the disappointment of the ongoing conflict in Sudan and ask for immediate halt to that conflict, and also urge the embassy of Sudan in Juba and the government of Sudan to do all that it can in order to bring this conflict into a halt. So we are also aware that the ongoing conflicts also include the war between Russia and Ukraine, as well as the conflict in Syria and other parts of the world. Those conflicts actually are threats to stability and also to peace in the world. And therefore, as World Resistance International, we have a moral obligation to do the best that we can in order to contribute in bringing these wars to an end. And one practical step is for us to ensure that our analysis to stop conflicts and wars should go beyond to analyzing the sources that consolidate and that promote the existence of war in those countries. Those who benefit from wars, we should know and understand that they should be made to know that war is not the solution to any conflict. Conflicts can always be resolved through dialogue and through peaceful means. And therefore, that is the message we wish to extend. In conclusion, I wish to express the commitment of PEN as a sub-regional organization to continue to work with World Resistance International and all partners globally in order to contribute to building peace in the region and beyond. I also wish to let you know that PEN plans to convene its second face-to-face meeting next year around May, and possibly in Arusha in Tanzania, in order to to continue to learn from our experiences, but most importantly, in order to discuss how can we support each other in order to increase the impact of our work in the region and beyond. And with these few words, I would like to wish all of you fruitful deliberations and all the best for the discussions that we have. I really felt and actually I put efforts to ensure that I participate in the forthcoming council, but because of logistical reasons, I cannot make it. Nevertheless, I hope with this video, you will be able to get some few insights. And some of my colleagues who will attend the in-person meeting, including Matt, will be able to provide some responses and clarifications should you need further clarifications about the work in the region. Thank you very much.
All right. So, yes, you can applaud if for no other reason it gives me an opportunity to come down off of the stairs. And we can put the lights on maybe now. So we have three of us here who will talk a little bit in person, and then hopefully we can mainly have a dialogue and conversation about what this work means. I'm just going to briefly introduce them and us, and then let's start it off with some words from up here, and then all of us in dialogue. From the beginning, what is this? Is International Africa Working Group, co-founded with a friend from Belgium who's happily in the audience, Jan van Krieken, and myself, understood this work than just the continent, but that diaspora and Africans around the world, including solidarity activists and non-Africans who did work in solidarity and in African peace studies, activism, and support work. So Greg Payton, for example, from the US, who's going to be with us tomorrow, and others were always part of this process. But one place has in some ways been historically a constant stream in the importance of Pan-African work in general, and that is Haiti. So we're very happy that Shirley Fabre, who's one of the representatives of International Fellowship of Reconciliation at the United Nations, and is a Haitian based in the US now, is going to be the first speaker. I'll then say a few words. I'll just say, as Moses mentioned, though I had only my first 25 or 30 years working with war as issues, most of my work now has been with the International Peace Research Association. So we're very pleased, IPRA is, to co-sponsor this event tonight. And I'll say some words on the history and some of that other work that Moses began talking about in terms of the future. And finally, we're really thrilled to have Salam Kadani with us tonight. It's true, she's based here in London, so she didn't have as far to travel as some. But in a way, it is also part of the reunion, because amongst other things, Salam was one of those founding people in that 2012 to 2014 period who was with us in Cape Town, South Africa, as the Pan became officially unfurled. So I'm going to try to quickly pull that down so we can go back to the live stream and slowly hand the microphone over to Shirley. So we'll begin the live conversation here and then the conversation with all of you in a few moments. Help me in welcoming Shirley Fabre.
Thank you so much, Jack. Thank you, everyone, for being here. So I'm going to speak to you guys a little bit about Haiti. And also, I just want to start with the question that Moses posed as to who benefits when there are these life conflicts. So just to give you a little bit of historical background in Haiti, which I'm sure most of you know, in 1804, Haiti became the first free Black republic in the world, and the only nation to be formed because of a successful African revolt against slavery and colonization. Former slaves defeated Napoleon's army and liberated the colony in the Americas. As the first country in the world to permanently abolish slavery and the slave trade, Haitians dealt a decisive blow to the entire system of slavery, and immediately our ancestors became a threat to the existing world order. And it feels like we have been made to pay the price for that ever since. So, I'm sure most of you know about history with the US and with France. And even as recently as 2004, there was a coup d'etat against Aristide when he rightfully asked France for reparations for the indemnity that Haitians had to pay after we won our independence. So now we have a situation in the country where there are gangs with guns And when you first hear it, it seems like this is a problem that Haiti and Haitians have created. However, these young men have no resources. They have no resources to be able to buy guns. And even if they did, Haiti does not have a gun manufacturing place in Haiti, right? We used to grow our own coffee. It actually is what made Haiti one of the richest colonies in the world. And thanks to like the Clinton administration, we don't even do that. So natural things that we have had in our country for centuries are gone. Like we don't grow our own rice anymore. We don't grow our own coffee anymore. So to say that all of these guns all of a sudden are flooding the streets of Haiti because of Haitians is ridiculous. Like definitely somebody is profiting from bringing this instability into the country. And people have always profited from bringing instability into the country because ever since we won our independence, the U.S. And other countries decided that it was not good for them to have an independent Black nation so close to them, right? And still, because of what Haiti not only meant to, not because of what this meant not only to Haitians, but because the Haitian Republic has supported independence everywhere. We've supported Bolivar when he was fighting for independence in Latin America. We even supported Greece in their fight for independence. So that has always been the Haitian mantra to support freedom everywhere. And I think that that doesn't, work for a lot of people. And then when you add to that resources, right? So you may not know, but Haiti has like mountains of gold. We know gold all over the rest of Latin America that has already been exported, but there's a lot of gold in Haiti that Haiti has just been sitting on. And a lot of this gold is in areas where you have a large peasant, kind of like agricultural population. So this population doesn't want to move from their land because the only way they're able to sustain themselves is their land. Not to mention this land has been in their family since the founding of Haiti. So the way that there has been two streams to try to get people off of their land. The first one was to set up these manufacturing places in Port-au-Prince and to try to get people into manufacturing. When that doesn't work, then the next step is violence. So after the 2010 earthquake, you had all of these youth who lost their families, who lost their parents, and who were going through so much trauma, and all of this aid that was supposed to come in to help actually did not go to help Haiti. The Red Cross famously lost $9 million of the aid that they were supposed to help. So you have those kids growing up with all of that trauma and then now being handed these guns and this ammunition. And so you have this situation where an already impossible situation has been made even more impossible. Add to that the natural disasters that continue to come. This is a clear recipe for destabilization, which you can see throughout Latin America, different ways that places are destabilized through these different means. And so before this, we had a occupation of UN troops in Haiti. And it was an occupation because the UN, under their own charter, had no reason to be in Haiti. Not the first time they were there, not the second time they were there. Since they've been there, they've brought cholera to the country. And then they first pretended that it wasn't them. But then through investigation, we found out it was them. Then there's been all of these rapes and trafficking that have happened under the UN. Because I don't know if you guys know, but if you're a UN peacekeeper and you commit a crime in a country, you cannot be tried for that crime, which by itself is like ridiculous. So they can't, it's been so unsuccessful and so terrible, especially after all of the trafficking things came out. I don't think that they have a way to come into Haiti. So by creating this instability is a way to try to get like international intervention. And we do not want international intervention. International intervention is what got us here. So the intervention we feel has to come from Haitians and diaspora Haitians at home, and also the larger peacekeeping movements, people that actually want to help and actually want to come together and make a difference. Because the only people that profit from these wars, whether it's like an actual war, like what's happening in Russia, or these like micro wars, these civilizations, are not going to be us regular people. They might send us there to fight or to quote unquote keep the peace that they created the instability, but really it's the corporations and those people that are gonna benefit. And especially when you're in a region where most people don't even know, like Haiti had. I, as a Haitian, did not know that Haiti had marble until I was doing research about like U.S. extraction. And there was this one island in Haiti that had like really beautiful marble, and the U.S. just took it over, extracted all, and then gave it back. So I think like when we're talking about resisting wars, we really have to resist these like the military industrial complex and these different organizations and these different think tanks and people that want to destabilize the different regions. And especially as we talk a lot about migration as part of like militarism, you're fighting it on both ends. So right now you have large migration into the US from Latin America and from Haiti. But then those people are met with more militarization, with more brutalization, because the structure of immigration has become more militarized, right? So we're increasingly seeing like more militarization as the answer to questions, when really I feel like the main question is like trying to figure out like why this is, instead of like why are these people coming to our country, like what are we doing to their countries to make them want to come in such a way. And I think when we look at that, we're still going to see a militarized viewpoint of how this happened, but maybe we'll see it in a more humanized way that we can make a change. Another thing I want to point out is I was lucky enough to go to Bogota. Last WRI meeting was in Bogota, and I made a lot of friends with people that get it the worst are women. And I feel like we should keep that in mind, because the situation has become beyond impossible for the women in Haiti. They're constantly like the layer of just regular domestic violence. You have another layer that comes from all of this instability and from women not being able to take care of themselves and to make the money to take care of themselves. And this abuse is just becoming so rampant and so terrible. And we can't live in a society where half of our society is being abused to like any level, but especially extreme levels. So I just think like it's really important when we have these conferences also to think about a lot of the times when I hear about think tanks and those different people, there are always people that are doing wrong. And I feel like we have enough, brain power here of people that want to do right. And we need to work on coming up with these solutions for the people that we want to advocate for. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. I just think I'm going to add, as briefly as I can, some thoughts, as I said, about the history and about contemporary, moving us to current day stuff. I think many of you, but maybe not all, know that War Resisters International has a deep and rich history in this work, which we don't always claim, and sometimes maybe claim too much. It's a little bit like a seesaw. But even if we're just going back, say, 60 or 70 of those years, it's key and important that at the key highlight moments of the anti-colonial struggle, some War Resisters International folks were there. Folks know a little bit about Bill Sutherland, who was my mentor, and we co-authored a book, Guns and Gandhi in Africa. He was an African-American conscientious objector and war resistor who decided to pick up his life and moved to what was then Gold Coast, Ghana, in 1953, 4 or 5 years before independence of that country. and he worked as a key part of the independence movements, married a Ghanaian woman, Efwa Sutherland, who ended up being one of the moving figures behind the reconstruction of the old slave castles into modern day museums that are of a more liberatory nature. So the door of no return becomes the door of return in Cape Coast, Ghana. But Bill had a history throughout the continent, moving eventually to the center of Pan-Africanism in the mid-60s to the 2000s in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and going back to Tanzania next year, as Moses said, is an exciting continuation of that loop of struggle in the city of peace in Dar es Salaam and the country that Julius Nyerere helped motivate towards a people's movement perspective. But maybe it's less known here that when Guns and Gandhi came out, close to 25 years ago, which means I'm more than 25 years old, I guess, the release that we did here in Europe took place in this town at the Africa Center with Roberta Bacik and mainly as a core spokesperson, aside from Bill and myself, of Michael Randall. And Michael's key piece, and Michael Scott also played a role, but Michael was with us back 60 years ago, back 25 years ago, and still today, was key not only because of his friendship and support of the work, but because he was part of it, especially in the late 50s and 60s as part of the Sahara protest teams and as part of War Resisters' international connection to the continent through those decades. And when we look at the Sahara protests, when we look at those sort of historied high points of War Resisters' engagement with the decolonization movements, it's also noteworthy that we can look at the War Resisters international conferences through the more recent period, through my paltry 40 of the last 100 years, and see some ups and downs. So I've written about Guns and Gandhi in Africa, notes the 1982 conference in Perugia, Italy. Glorious time for a young teenager, still 18, to see these global expressions, broken rifles and nonviolence in many different forms and languages. And Asia was only represented by two guys from India, the land of Gandhi. Okay, that was easy, Devi Prasad and Narayan Desai, but no one from Africa. And so the idea of making our internationalism a true internationalism became a driving force for a number of us. And I would say that was a low point, but a motivating point. Yes, some of the people are still coming from council. They're in, they're out, but we're waving to each other. But then there are many other higher points. So I think about the WI conference in India, where we, at a fair amount of risk to the individuals involved, had 4 South Africans, a representative of Black Sash, representative of the African movement from the South African Council of Churches, and 2 of these young white students from this newish group called the End Conscription Campaign, which was uniting the anti-apartheid and anti-racist struggles with anti-militarist struggles. And it was really at that conference in India that a number of the connections that supported the mass democratic and nonviolent grassroots movements in South Africa of the late 80s and early 90s made their connections. And so I think that's a very important proud moment of our more recent history. And we think about 1994, and the world thinks about the end of apartheid as this time that international solidarity played a great role, and that's true. And divestment played a great role, and that's true. And that it was done non-violently, that 94 elections took place with relatively little violence, less than many of us expected. And that's some great South African miracle, which is also true. But key parts of it, which is not as often spotlighted, are those last 4 or 5 years of the late 80s and 90s, where it was tremendously violent in the country, and there was tremendous possibility of greater violence, and in fact, continuing war, not an end to apartheid, but civil war. And that was averted based on many intense people's movements organizations, constructive programs, if you will. And a lot of that conversation and a certain amount of that international solidarity took place off of the WI conference in India. and we should note that. Yeah, we have some tricky moments and some moments that had some difficult times. The South African conference in 2014 was amazing and extraordinary. And by the way, Nozizwe Madlala sends her greetings and love, and is also now relocated out of South Africa, which is in a struggling period now. She's now in Geneva as the director of the Quaker United Nations office. After 2014, there was relatively less action and less connectivity for some years. But Shirley talks about Bogota, and that was, I think, another high point. We saw the beginning of another network. And I think for me, for many of us who are doing this work, it's been more about promoting work in Africa than promoting WI in Africa. That hasn't been the point. And so whether it's working with E4 or with Resistance Studies Network or with IPRA or other organizations, it's really about supporting the work. So in Bogota, in addition to all the WI work we did, there was the formation of, or the beginning seeds of a group that grew and grew in Juba and other places with the support of Resistance Studies, called the Occupied Peoples Forum, where in addition to anti-neo-colonial and anti-1950s and 60s colonialism, we also have a focus on modern-day colonialism that includes at least two key countries in Africa, Western Sahara foremost, and Ambazonia, which is still a colony of Cameroon in West Central. And then we had the online conference, the 100th anniversary conference just recently for WI, that didn't exactly have a featured African speaker on the plenaries, which was sad to some of us. It was one of the speakers at the plenary, and Rose has been part of PAN for years and sends her greetings again to this gathering. She's West Papuan, part of the Occupied Peoples Network, and long a part of PAN and the WI Africa Working Group. But she still is a representative from Asia Pacific, from outside the continent. And there's ample people on the continent like Moses and many others who could have been sourced to have some conversation in those online conferences a year ago. But I guess I'll close by saying part of the work going forward, part of what was spotlighted in Juba, part of what a number of us think of as the Juba moment, is a certain maturation of the field. I'm kind of shocked and thrilled that Housemans have so many of books that I've been and we've been affiliated with up here. One new one, Insurrectionary Uprisings, a reader in Revolutionary Nonviolence and Decolonization, has a fair chunk of Africa content in there. But there's also the one Africa World Press book that they have here is Seeds of New Hope. This is one of 2 volumes. And it really speaks to a lot of how much of the work that International Peace Research Association and those of us in WI are doing. This is Pan-African Peace Studies for the 21st century. And volume 2 is Pan-African Peace Action for the 21st century. And I think never again are we going to have this as 2 volumes. Because in our book, as in our work, the academic and the activism part are in so many places on the continent one and the same. They are at least integrally connected, and we want to continue seeing that and doing that. So one of the things about the Juba moment is that if one wants to look at the idea of African peace studies as a field of study on the continent, and Africa peace action as a sort of developed, thoughtful piece since the days of Michael Randall and Bill Sutherland, there was an initial period, an early period, that in some ways we're passing now. And I think we're at a period now in the fields, in the continent, of a more mature or maturational space where we can begin to think of what Pan-Africanism can mean. And Salam is going to talk a little bit about that. But one thing it means on a purely, well, nothing is purely logistical, but a logistical political connection, is that E4 always had a deeper engagement with African colleagues in the French-speaking parts of the continent, and IPRA in the Northern and Arabic-speaking parts of the continent. And so Juba saw a bringing together of some of those forces, and I think now we're looking at a deepening of that, including, of course, many Africans who are speaking primarily Swahili or Amharic or African languages. So looking at crossing those language boundaries as well as the physical borders is a thing that's happening in this more mature phase. And finally, part of what I'm doing here this week, and part of what we're talking about in Africa World Press, in IPRA, and hopefully with the partnership of WI and others, including of course PANDEN, is looking at producing a series, several years of series of books that are looking deeply at this moment and about shared resources, shared practices, shared trainings, shared work, including strategies and tactics for movements and building movements that that looks beyond borders, but also looks beyond the academy. They're not books that are going to be impossible to read, but hopefully they'll also include, and we plan to include, comic books and popular education and primers, so that we can really look at a more massification of, and some of the groups in Deborah in various locales, but looking at more of an ability to have Africans producing materials for Africans about people's power, about the power of civil resistance, about the power of the work we've been doing and we've been building upon for now 2, 3, 5, 10 decades. So it's an honor to be here. If we're going to bring things to this conference coming up this week, it's amazing to be here at Houseman's to open this up. So thank you all for coming and thank you for listening. And now it's time for Salam.
Thank you. It is indeed an honor to be here and to see Matt again. I don't have I don't have a presentation as such. I would like to speak from the heart, and I would like to speak about emphasize the need for solidarity, the need for a new kind of revolution in Africa. And I would like to do that by building, giving you a series of snapshots of my life and my experiences. I'll start with 1974. It's not my memory, I don't remember it, but I grew up with parents who remember whose revolution that was, the of Emperor Haile Selassie's era in Eritrea, in Ethiopia, the revolution then, the slogans, Merit Larashu, Run to the Tiller was a slogan. They were progressive days, I guess. Things were hopeful. Many people thought things were going to be hopeful. And so it was meant to be an egalitarian word, I guess. Sadly, that didn't transpire for many Ethiopians and Eritreans. In fact, I grew up with parents who were traumatized by that era. I grew up in a society that was even more violent. Sugar or red terror was the thing that many people experienced. It slaughtered an entire generation of young people, and the gap can be felt to this day. That was a really sad situation from a revolution that promised equality, egalitarianism. It didn't happen. The war in Eritrea, which is where my family is from, worsened. So we grew up in an era where violence was the norm, and so that was my my childhood. That was the snapshot, my first reflection of in the region, in the Horn of Africa. My next snapshot is of an equally promising era, which was the independence of Eritrea. I remember it very well. I was here, but I do remember the euphoria, the hopefulness, the celebrations that lasted not days, not weeks, months, maybe even years. I went back to Eritrea in 1994, and it was still going on from 1991 to 1994. Eritreans were dancing It was very hopeful. It was brought about by the Eritrean Liberation Front, and it was meant to be liberating Eritreans. It was meant to give Eritreans their rights to self-determination, to be a nation, but all sorts of things. It was the end of an era of 30 years of struggle where every Eritrean household saw at least one person being sacrificed or dying for the revolution. Every household was affected. Sadly, that liberal, or I don't know, that liberty never transpired. And this is my own era of activism in which I have come to experience that Eritreans have lost nearly every freedom. And so I've got so many hats to fit in with that struggle. One of the things that we've been doing over the years is what we call the Stop Slavery in Eritrea movement, which is against the fact that every Eritrean young person at the age of 16, 17 has to go to the National Service Training Center to complete their high school education. That's everyone. So every Eritrean is trained to become a soldier and only allowed to continue with their education if once they have completed that training. So we have for many years been calling for that to be, and when they're not being a soldier, they're offering free services in anything that the government has asked them to do, whether it is working the land, mining, anything basically, from teaching all the way to mining. So basically, we believe that these are not students, these are not even soldiers, they are slaves, because they're being forced to live where they don't want to live. They're not being paid, they have got no rights, they don't even have the right to own a mobile phone in their name. So they have to wait for their grandparents to pass away so they could take that mobile phone, that SIM card. So these are effectively slaves, and it's modern day slavery. And so we've been fighting against that. We've also been fighting against the fact that there is absolutely no religious freedom in the country. Every church that doesn't belong to the 4 recognized religious groups is shut. Meeting, getting married, baptizing, whatever, even meeting in small groups to pray together in your house is banned if you don't belong to the 4 official religious groups that are heavily monitored and also governed in a way by the government. So we've got an organization called Release Eritrea that meets outside the embassy, not far from here, in Angel Islington, every year to hold a vigil. So many thousands of people have been arrested, thousands more have fled the country. There are people who have been imprisoned since 2002, who were leaders of these churches. Their children have been, some were born after they were arrested, have grown up, are married, and have children themselves now. And their parents are, their fathers mostly in that situation. Young people are also getting arrested for showing religious tendencies that belonging to that sect. The most recent is hundreds of high school students and college students who were caught making a Christian song video. And they released the video, but they were arrested, hundreds of them, 130 some. So we fight against that. There's no freedom of any sort, as I say. There's no freedom of expression, certainly. There's no newspaper, there's no independent newspaper in Eritrea, there's government newspaper. So Matt, Adis, and others have helped us to build this very nascent, very small resistance movement inside the country, where we train activists to have the Sham Underground newspaper, produce some posters and stickers to put up, just to express, just to teach people the art of resistance. And that includes just one of the things that we do encourage people to do is to stay at home. You know, we call it empty the streets on Friday evenings, just to show their resistance. Stay at home. You can't go out and protest. We know how brutal the regime is, so stay at home. So to just teach that collective voice, to just keep the voice of peaceful resistance going inside Eritrea. So Eritrea is brutal. Eritreans are being traumatized, and Eritreans need the solidarity. One of the things that baffles me about working in this field is the fact that how little other Africans know about what's going on in Eritrea. It's back in the days, it used to be as bad in Europe. We used to have to show them map and show Ethiopia and then show Eritrea to the north and tell the story. But it's not as bad anymore in Europe. It's not as bad anymore elsewhere. But in Africa, it's really, really worrying how little solidarity that there is. And it's not just worrying for us, for Eritreans, but it's worrying because we can see how that atomization, how that gulf that has emerged across Africa, across the whole of Africa, definitely is causing, is fueling war in the region. It is those very young Eritreans that I advocate for, because I think they're modern day slaves, that were fighting the war in Ethiopia, in Tigray, and killing, raping, brutalizing, and looting Tigrayans who are just as poor as them. And the war in Tigray that we just saw the last 3 years is one of the most brutal things that I've ever seen. Thousands of women were raped by Eritrean soldiers. These were Eritreans that would have been refugees in Tigray had the war not broken. And this is the direct result of the fact that we do not have solidarity, we do not have knowledge about each other, we do not identify with each other in the region. We've been so traumatized and brutalized, and collective trauma has made us so inward looking that we are not seeing the other as a fellow human being, let alone. So I am here to, yes, I would encourage the publications and the different formats, and yes, please, let's do those. But here to ask the questions of, we really need to understand this. You know, why did these young people agree to go and fight against their own kin, basically? Well, it's the same people. Why? Why did we agree to do that? Why did they agree to do that? Why did the rest of Africa ignore Tigray? Why was the Eritrean dictator, one of the most brutal that the world has ever seen, welcomed as a hero in Ethiopia? Yeah. Why was there even a debate about him being the co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize that the Ethiopian Prime Minister got? Why isn't there an uproar against all of this in the rest of Africa? So these are the questions that I would like to ask, and I guess it's time for a new revolution in Africa, and hopefully this time it would be fraternity that we would go for. Thank you very much.
So I think simply it's time to open it up. And of course, you can ask questions and we can try to answer them, but you can also give answers and we'll try to listen carefully. Or we can have dialogue, which we need to have to go forward with this. So who would like to start us off? Please.
First of all, thank you.
Why don't you say it here so that everyone can hear?
First of all, thank you both, and thank you for the presentations. Very disturbing. I want to help. I run a publishing company, publishing human rights books. One of our authors is Joseph Kafala in Sierra Leone, who is involved in, like yourself, trying to bring people together after these two civil wars. And other authors in similar situations, and I would just like to help, so I'm going to give you my card afterwards. Thank you all very much.
Andrew's agreed to go around with the microphone. And do you want to say who you are?
I'm wondering how much has been investigated how Ned has influenced the politics and the situations. A lot that has happened in Africa, I lived there for 5 years, is creative. You had the North African, you had the Princess Hassan bin Talal, who was an ex-chair of the Club of Rome, and he started up the Mediterranean Basin Renewable Energy Consortium that was supposed to give 5 different kinds of renewable energy to Europe. Unfortunately, North Africa did not accept democracy, and so they went to Plan B, which was the United Nations securing the southern part of the Sahara, so that ostensibly living trees, basically, but also maintaining the south of the Sahara until they can deal with the north. And I'm just wondering, the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, and here we have DORA, Defense of the Realm Act, but NED was started in the 70s by Reagan, and it's right-wing think tank, conservative, of course. And if you look on their website, you can see all the different NGOs that they fund. In Egypt alone, there were 30. This is pre-annual meeting in Central Square, and they gave them $30,000 to $250,000 a year to be more active towards bringing democracy into the area.
Yeah.
When it broke out in Tunisia, then it was Egypt, and then it went to Algeria. The IMF flew into Algeria and said, if you remove your barriers to trade, because you had to be 51% Algerian and then in Algeria, we will stop the revolution in Algeria. So they removed the barrier, and immediately the Germans built a turbine factory, and the Chinese built a truck factory, and the French built a Peugeot car factory. But the Algerians said to me, the Chinese were so alien that they couldn't deal with them, so they left, and the French and the Germans took over that factory. And that was to bring trucks and turbines into the Sahara Desert. What they're not telling people is that the largest aquifer, freshwater aquifer, is under the Sahara. And the trouble they're having in Darfur at the moment is something where they pushed all the people from the south and the north over to the west. But they can't allow them to stay there because it's so rich in oil and gas. I'm just wondering, when you're thinking about what's happening in Africa, if you take into consideration the external influence that creates a constructed reality that is not reality to the local people.
Mm. Gonna respond?
Other than to agree, I guess that's why I'm calling for solidarity. It's not like it's not like we don't have the know-how in Africa. It's not like we don't have the understanding in Africa. We may not have the resources yet, but this is why we should only allow the things that are useful to us, that are organic to our problems. We should start to define our difficulties ourselves. We should, the narrative needs to come from the people that own the narrative. We should stop parroting what we're told about ourselves.
Can I say something?
Thank you for that question. I know it was about Africa, but I just want to say when it comes to Haiti, and also to thank you for your part in giving us a voice, because what happens is a lot of times when people hear stories about how the situation got this way, this information that you're giving is completely left out. As I mentioned in Haiti with the area where there's gold, so when you see, so Canada had went into that area, and they first went in and they said, "We will give you guys." They went. They didn't go in through the Canadian company that wants to mine the gold. They went in through a non-for-profit, and they said, "We're going to give you guys food, right?" And people were like, "Okay, great," because we're food insecure. But they were like, "We're only going to give you the food if you let this company mine this gold." So this went on. People were protesting against it. When you first heard about the Haitian protest against it, it seemed like the way that it was framed was that there was this like peasant revolt because the Haitian government wasn't taking care of its people. And that is true. But what is also true is that these people were actually revolted. So then the answer to that was for the US to come in to help the Haitian government, right? So the first part is true. The Haitian government isn't taking care of its people because the Haitian government is a vassal state, right? But what is not true is that there doesn't need to be foreign intervention to help with this situation. Because again, the reason that you have this situation is because of this kind of extraction, right? So I think like people, so anyway, the story was able to get out, but it was actually able to get out in Canada. And when people in Canada found out that this was happening, they then organized against this and stopped it, right? So I think a lot of times, what I was trying to say earlier, and I'm sorry, I was a little nervous, maybe it wasn't clear, but people need to know these things. They need to know like what is happening and how we actually got here so that there can be a change. Because I really feel like when people know the true story of what's happening, they're able to see it more clearly. And I think like, especially I can speak for the US, a lot of times when we hear like foreign aid going into a country, it sounds like something that's so good, right? But I don't know if you guys know what tide aid is. But Tide Aid says that if I give you $1, if you have a project and you need $1 and you ask, let's say I'm the US, I'm gonna say no, I need to give you $10. And then with those $10, you owe me interest on $10, right? And then I'm also gonna say that you have to spend $7 to buy like whatever you need for your project, you need to get it from US companies. Then I'm gonna say, okay, the only way you can pay me back is gold, so you're gonna pay me back in gold, right? It sounds good, except none of the countries that actually have gold control the gold market. It is controlled in London and it is controlled in New York. So before I give you these $10 that I know you need for this project that you've been talking about, I can make sure that I lower the price of gold. So now you have to pay me more gold. You have to spend $7 of the dollars on our companies when you could get it for cheaper, or just have international relations with somebody else and get it from them. And then you owe me interest on it, and I'm controlling the price of the thing that you're going to use to pay me back, right? So this is tide aid, and it happens all the time. So when people talk about even aid going into a country, you have to understand how that all works. And I think that the people just don't have that information. It's not out there. Our voices are not out there. And I think it's important to be able to work on these. And like you mentioned about the think tank, this is what I was trying to say before. Like, there's so many think tanks, and every time I hear that word, it is never associated with anything good. It is mostly always right wing. And I'm not saying that we need to like combat them in the same way, but I feel like there needs to be a change within the left, and we need to like take more decisive actions, but also have more, maybe our own think tanks, or maybe we name it something different because now that name is pretty terrible, but you know.
Yeah, so just to say, I think you want to say something, and there's some. No. Okay, so just to say, I think you're hearing agreement, and I think there's never really been disagreement about those points. I think, certainly the Africanist, Pan-Africanist perspective, since decades ago, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania said, okay, this is great. We have successfully gotten flag independence. we haven't gotten economic independence. And the reason Africa is the poorest continent in the world is because it's the richest continent in the world. That's the reason. So I think there's profound agreement, and I think the question is, and it's a challenge particular for what we do now when we talk about the building of the next, is we're not talking about a national liberation armed struggle. We're not talking about that at all. Not that that was wrong, or that what happened in the 70s and 80s, etc., wasn't perhaps necessary. You know, as nonviolent activists, we can debate, you know, how things could have been done, and coulda, woulda, shoulda is complicated. But it is to say that this moment requires different strategies, different tactics, and a different integration of the understanding of feminist notions of power, of economic issues, and the complexities of colonialism, neocolonialism, and modern day corporatism, etc., etc. So it's part of our ongoing collective struggle. Next, we have a few people online, so get online for the mic.
A short question on Eritrea. You mentioned that there are 4 officially recognized religious groups. So my question, which are those 4 groups? And is there any major other religious group that's suffering from non-recognition?
So Islam, or a form of Islam, is recognized, but heavily controlled. Who protested against that control and the persecution of other Christians was under house arrest for 7-8 years, and he passed away. Well, he is a recognized martyr in the church now. So, and then Catholic is also recognized, but they've lost all independence, and really other than the church buildings that they've put. And Lutheran, the Protestants, just Lutherans. So every other religious group, every other group, the Baptists, is illegal. So, yeah.
So I just wanted to comment on the last thing about the military or non-violent revolutions, and I think Eritrea is a very, very good example for the result of the study of Chenoweth and Stephen about the success of non-violent revolutions against military revolutions, because this liberation army is militaristic, and so are their politics, and so the dictatorship is not a surprise, but it's structural, and so this is a very good example for why a non-violent revolutions are more successful than the others, and more democratic, and bringing more democracy in it. It's also I think it's 8 times more successful than in military revolutions. So that it becomes a democracy.
But it's also where we can learn what it takes to have a successful non-violent revolution as well.
Yes.
Education is important,
Yes.
And also respect for human life is very important. These are the 2 things that are at very low points in Eritrea. So before we can, and I say this because there is a lot of diaspora-based activism amongst Eritreans. We have tried and have been supported in trying to nurture a resistance movement inside Eritrea. But the struggle is the fact that education has been deliberately militarized, and so it takes a lot. Religion has been undermined in every form of religion has been undermined. So conscience is so respect for human life is struggling. That's why Eritrea has, in addition to being the largest exporter of refugees, is also the largest exporter of armed young men who would go and fight in Ethiopia, possibly in Sudan, if we look carefully, in Congo definitely, and in Somalia. And so we will we're all of Africa, most of Africa is suffering as a result of what's going on in that tiny place called Eritrea.
I want to say, and I know Erica Chenoweth agrees with this because we've had conversations about it, and I love her work, and I think citing her is correct. But I think these percentages, these numbers, 8 times more, are very complicated, and I think at very least, much more research needs to be done. So proving Gandhi correct is a nice tag for selling books, and we're in a bookstore. Nonetheless, I think we have to look at what that means, what was studied in her work, which is important, and what still needs to be studied. So I say that also to say that there are problems with the Eritrea example from the point of view. Yes. I think there's a lot of research, well beyond Chenoweth and others, that talks about the role of militarized education in creating militarized societies. Whether that militarism was for revolution or counter-revolution or whatever side of the fence you want to sit on. So that's clear. But the example I've used and written about, and I think is being explored in different ways, is Mozambique. Because Mozambique has this, like almost from the left at least, universally accepted the armed struggle was a success. Except quiet as it's kept. And I love the idea as an historian of listening carefully to quieter voices, listening to voices that are not as loud. And these are not necessarily voices of the voiceless, but someone as voiceful with as large a platform as Graça Machel, who was, after all, the Minister of Education of Mozambique, but was also the wife of the first independence president of Mozambique before she married this guy named Nelson. You know, Graça is one of those folks who has looked at and talked, sometimes more quieter than our other work, about the problematics of the post-independence education period being so rooted in their glorification of the gun. And it's why, again, quietly in Mozambique in 2012, not in 2014 as much, some Mozambican activists that were part of War Resistance International training and training of trainers talked about the movements to take the AK-47, the gun symbol, off of their flag. So I think we have these burgeoning movements throughout the continent, throughout the global south, throughout the world, but more prominent in the global south, that are saying, yes, everything you said is correct. And Eritrea's example is tricky because of, in some ways, the still absolute tyrannical power of the dictator and the complications that the nonviolence movement has faced. But there are other places where the story is not quite as depressing.
I have a question about Eritrea. I would like to know, is it a socialist government? What would you call it?
Say your name.
My name is Veronica from Germany.
My very brief answer is a pathocracy. It's a very diseased system. It's a dictatorship. It has got its socialist roots, but the Eritrea's independence struggle was pragmatic, and so it met and lost friends along the way. So and the complication also the fact at the time, Ethiopia, the occupying nation, was socialist. So two socialist entities were effectively fighting each other. So it was a very uncomfortable relationship. The current regime, the current system in Eritrea is a very nationalistic, very one-man show. So it's very difficult to pin any ideology onto it. Very fiercely independent, rejects all foreign aid, immune to any from anything, a very paranoid leader at the heart, has created a very paranoid system around him. Sorry, it's not an answer, I know, but.
I wanted to state that the gold miners were probably Anglo-American. That was probably coming behind it, because they also claimed the largest gold mine in Bolivia, where they tried ousted Evo Morales, and they did it in a very clever way. I mean, the National Endowment for Democracy. What they do is the Bolivians in Cochabamba have their own social center, and it's all done by volunteers and local people. The Americans made one 2 blocks away, and then they started paying the people to work there, and of course, people flocked to that one because they were paid workers. But they also was the reason why they allowed Indonesia to invade West Papua, the world's largest gold mine once again, and that was Anglo-American again. So you have this. If you look on the website of National Endowment for Democracy, every country has these right-wing organizations that are NGOs, ostensibly with democracy. In Tanzania, Nyerere, I met Nyerere when I was in Tanzania. I was doing rock paintings, it's another story, but he invited 250,000 Chinese, which came on jumbo jets without the seats, sat on the floor, and they came in to build the railway. I think the Americans are building the road. But what he did was he signed a 100-year contract with all the small stuff you find in the small shop, and all would be bought from China. Plus, they got access to their minerals for the next 100 years.
Wow.
So I want to make sure if we are winding down a little bit now. I'm not sure we are, but I sense we might be. And some people are thinking about getting up for the beginning of the conference tomorrow morning. I want to end on a slightly more positive note, though we accept your. I think Mwalimu Nyerere, and I don't usually call Gandhi Mahatma because his first name was Mohandas, and I don't like the idea of deifying our figures. So great souls always annoy me, but Mwalimu means teacher in Swahili, and I thought that was a better name. So he at the end of his life understood the cost of the Tanzam Railroad and what it meant, and of course in those days, in the earlier '60s, China was seen as a much more potentially benevolent force. So things change, and things fall apart, but things also come together. And Grace Paley, from my own country, talked about enormous changes at the last minute. And that doesn't just refer to relationships and personal stuff. It refers to politics as well. The way Dennis Brutus of South Africa, said everything, especially revolutions, seem impossible until they happen, and then they seem that they were inevitable. So I'm just going to say that 2 weeks ago, I was in Trinidad at the global conference of my organization, of International Peace Research Association. And everything you said about Anglo-American and everything you said about Bolivia is correct. And it's also correct that Vivian Camacho gave the most rousing speech I've heard in many, many years, maybe my whole life. And I go to a lot of conferences, and I've been at a lot of conferences. And until I dyed it brown recently, my hair was very, very white and gray. And the fact of the matter is, I don't find speeches too exciting too often. But Vivian Camacho from Bolivia gave this speech that you can find online. This evening tonight will be at the IPRA YouTube channel, and hers is as well. You can look at it later tonight if you want more of this. But, in her speech, she talked about the integration of a feminist analysis, an environmentalist analysis, a humanist analysis, an indigenous analysis, an analysis that talked about health. And it was health of the planet, health of our peoples, health of our organizations, and individual health. Now, I say this because it's a cool speech, but also because she's a top government minister in Bolivia today. She's an indigenous woman who is a government minister for traditional health and healing. So again, you have these ebbs and flows where Anglo-American has done tremendous, what destabilization of a country more than Anglo-American in Bolivia, and yet there are these rays of hopes. So I think it's our job to pick up those rays of hopes, to have them nourish us, to listen to them carefully, especially those of us in the global north, especially those of us with the privilege. We talk about white skin privilege, but we have the privilege of having access to some of this information and maybe having a little bit of extra time or money or whatever to give solidarity. And we often think of ourselves as sort of not powerful or impotent or whatever. And we don't have, we have more power than we know, right? We have more power to do even things that may seem little, but are quite big and impactful. And we have to start using it more consistently, more rigorously, and more in conversation with our comrades from all over the world. Is there another question, or is that the closing remark before you give your last remarks? Okay, that's the closing remark. You want to say your last words, and then we'll be done. We can go home.
Thank you very much. These gatherings like this make me proud of being in this work, in this activism. It keeps me going in all the little things, the little picking up the little rays of hope and making them work. And it especially makes me proud that it's happening in my hometown in London. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you guys for coming out, and it's reassuring to know that there are people that want to do this work, because a lot of times you just feel kind of alone in it. So yeah, just thank you guys for coming out, and thank you for IPRA and WRI for giving us this space.
See you tomorrow. Thank you.